Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone, and welcome to the 25th episode of The Rolling Stone. You guys know the drill. This is where I give my initial thoughts, opinions, analyses on stories that are currently in the news. And we have to start off this video, this episode of The Rolling Stone, with one of the big pieces of news this week, because the woke could rejoice, because they finally attained what they have been trying to get for the past 2 years, which is a formal impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. The House of Representatives actually has initiated formal impeachment inquiries against Trump. Nancy Pelosi did a complete 180, going from we aren't going to impeach Trump, that's really bad politics, especially during an election cycle, to yes, we are looking into actually impeaching the president. Now, how did this all shake down? A whistleblower came forward and said that at the end of July, Trump made a call to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And in that call, Trump made a quid pro quo arrangement with Zelensky. Trump basically said Ukraine was only going to get $400 million in aid from the United States if Ukraine would open up an investigation into Joe Biden. Now, the reason why alarm bells started ringing and the left and the ideologues started talking about corruption is because Joe Biden is, of course, one of the front runners for the Democrat Party's presidential nominee. Right now, it looks like it's either going to be him or Elizabeth Warren, though, of course, politics is like the weather, and so it can change on a dime. So this is the whole reason why the House started formal impeachment inquiries against Trump, because they said Trump is trying to influence the 2020 election. He has basically strong-armed a foreign power into investigating one of his rivals so that he can get dirt on him, or at the very least embarrass him and use that against him in the Democratic primaries, what's left of them, and if Biden wins the nomination in the general election. That's why people on the left were saying that we have to start impeachment inquiries, we have to start the impeachment process. Trouble is, there are a couple of problems with this story. The first one being is that this so-called whistleblower didn't actually witness anything. This whistleblower wasn't in the room when Trump made that call to Ukrainian President Zelensky. He didn't overhear the call. He only got this story secondhand from someone that he knew. And so, as conservative commentator Mark Levin was saying, this means that this whole story from this whistleblower is just hearsay. It's not evidence. He said in a regular court of law, this wouldn't stand up as evidence, which means that you have nothing to actually go forward with an investigation. But it gets even better than that, because the White House actually released a transcript of the call between Trump and President Zelensky. Although it might be better to call it, as the left has pointed out, it is not really a transcript, because it is not a verbatim record of what was said between the two parties. It's more of a memorandum, right, made after the fact. But in either case, the interesting thing about this transcript or this memorandum is that, as several sources pointed out, there is no direct quid pro quo arrangement being made between Trump and Zelensky. Trump calls Zelensky, congratulates Zelensky on winning his election for president of Ukraine. He reminds Zelensky that the U.S. is a much firmer ally of Ukraine than the European Union is. Zelensky says, hey, I would like some more Javelin anti-tank missiles in order to keep the Russians on their side of the border, because the Russians think that Ukraine belongs to them. And then Trump says, okay, but I would like you to do me a favor. Now, the left has jumped on this, and they've jumped from I would like you to do me a favor to investigate Joe Biden, when there is this whole piece in the middle, because the favor that Trump specifically asked Zelensky for in exchange for the Javelin missiles doesn't have anything to do with Joe Biden. Trump instead wanted Zelensky to investigate Ukraine's involvement in the 2016 US presidential election. Because remember that whole thing about Russia collusion and Russia tampering with the 2016 US election? Well, there was a thread that actually went, which led all the way to Ukraine. Trump said to President Zelensky, could you investigate what you can on that side? It's only later, after making that statement, after asking for that favor, only then does Trump say, oh, and by the way, it would be really good if you could work with Rudy Giuliani, who is now, he was the former mayor of New York. He was the mayor of New York City during 9/11. He is now Trump's personal lawyer. Trump said, it would be really great, President Zelensky, if you could work with Rudy Giuliani and Attorney General William Barr to investigate Joe Biden too, to reopen that investigation. Okay, so the transcript makes clear that there was not a clear quid pro quo agreement between Trump and Zelensky between, hey, you've got to open up an investigation into Joe Biden for these anti-tank missiles and for this $400 million in financial aid that we're set to give you. Now, some people may still see these red flags and see the flashing lights because they're asking, why in the heck would Trump even ask a foreign president to open up an investigation against a U.S. citizen, especially one who is running for the presidency? Why would he even do that? Well, that in and of itself is a very sordid story. And to understand that, we've got to go back all the way to March of 2016. March of 2016, Barack Obama is still president of the United States, which means that Joe Biden is still the vice president. The 2016 election is now in full swing. It looks, Trump is getting closer to snagging the Republican nomination. He's not the nominee yet. Hillary Clinton is the de facto nominee for the Democrat Party. Joe Biden goes to Ukraine. Joe Biden is appointed the point man for the Obama administration's Ukrainian policy. He goes to Ukraine and he tells the then president of Ukraine that if they want to get the $1 billion in aid that the Obama administration has set aside for them, Ukraine will fire its head prosecutor, a man named Yuri Lutsenko. Okay? If Ukraine wants the $1 billion in financial aid that the Obama administration is geared up to send to them, they are going to fire their head prosecutor, Yuri Lutsenko. And by the way, if they don't get the $1 billion in financial aid, Ukraine, the whole country, is going to go into solvency. So guess what? Ukraine actually fires their head prosecutor. Now, why would Biden get involved in this? Well, coincidentally enough, Ukraine's lead prosecutor, that Yuri Lutsenko, he had begun an investigation into a Ukrainian energy company, okay, named Burisma Holdings, which is owned by a Ukrainian oligarch. And who happened to be sitting on the board of that company, Burisma Holdings? Who happened to be sitting on the board of that company, even though he had no experience, he had no connections to Ukraine, and he had just recently been kicked out of the Navy Reserve because they had found him abusing cocaine? Guess who? Take a wild guess. It was none other than Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. So, we have Hunter Biden, son of Joe Biden, on the board of this Ukrainian energy company, Burisma Holdings, which the lead prosecutor for Ukraine, this Yuri Lutsenko, has opened up a corruptions investigation against. And then, at the same time that that's happening, Biden comes over and tells Ukraine, if you want that $1 billion in aid, you're going to fire your lead prosecutor, this Lutsenko. which of course means that his investigation is going to be closed, which also means potentially that there is not going to be any investigation into Hunter Biden, or at the very least Hunter Biden isn't going to be involved in this investigation, which means that the Bidens, the Obama administration, the Democrat Party in general, including Hillary Clinton, who is running for president, are spared a great deal of embarrassment. Okay? That is what was happening. That is why Trump asked President Zelensky now to reopen that investigation, because it was cut short by the Obama administration strong-arming the Ukraine. Now, so that's the story in all of its background, and I have 3 observations to make here, and I'm going to tackle them one at a time, going from the most particular to the most universal, okay? In the first place, if this is the story that is going to get Trump into hot water, if his call to President Zelensky, okay, and this supposed quid pro quo arrangement, if that is what's going to get him into hot water, then shouldn't, by the standard and the dictates of justice, shouldn't Joe Biden remove himself completely from the 2020 election? Shouldn't he do that? Because he has proven himself as vice president that he was more than willing to strong-arm a foreign country and basically blackmail its government for what seems to be personal reasons, to spare his son and himself and his family and the administration he worked for and his political party and its candidate at the time any potential embarrassment. Right? Shouldn't Joe Biden remove himself from the presidential election? This presidential election, shouldn't he remove himself from the 2020 race? I mean, he's certainly proven himself that he's a bully. He's certainly proven that he's not above blackmailing foreign countries for this. And remember back in 2016 when everyone said that it was a terrible thing for the Russians to try to meddle in our elections, and we couldn't do this and this couldn't be allowed because, damn it, this is a free democracy and we have to uphold the integrity of our elections. Well, what do you call Biden? You know, basically pushing his nose into Ukraine's internal affairs and making the reception of financial aid that they desperately need hinging on firing a particular man so that Biden's family will stay safe. Biden's family and his administration will stay safe. What do we call that except interference in a foreign power? Meddling in a government's business. Meddling might be even worse than in an election, because here it was a completely internal affair that had to do with corruption, right? So if this is what Trump is going to get in trouble for, shouldn't Biden get into just as much trouble for that? That's the first point. The second point, a more broader one, is that the Democrat Party and the modern American left, they are very much like the little boy who cried wolf. Because we know that ever since Donald Trump took that oath of office in January of 2017, even before when he won the election back in November of 16, the left has been trying to make something stick on him. We had 2 years of the Russian collusion story and the Russian investigation. That turned out to be a puff of smoke. Nothing came of it. Turned out that there was no collusion, there was no corruption. And now we have this story, which again, there is no evidence. We don't even have a whistleblower, because the whistleblower who came forward wasn't even present for the supposed crime. And according to the transcript or memorandum that the White House released, there was no quid pro quo agreement between Trump and Zelensky. So again, this story has no substance. It's an empty casket. It's an empty barrel, which looks impressive, which sounds nice, but when you look inside of it, there's nothing there. And the disservice that the Democrats have done with that, and the left has done, is because by crying wolf so many times, who would actually believe them if there actually was a reason for Trump to be removed from office? Let's say that Trump did commit a high crime or misdemeanor of some sort that warranted an investigation, that warranted impeachment. Who would believe the left? Now, who would actually believe the left? Oh, their diehard fans would, their sycophants would, their quasi-religious zealots would, but would anyone else? Would anyone else of the, the independent class, the middle people who don't associate with Republicans or Democrats or conservatives or progressives, would anyone believe them? Because anyone who's honest and anyone who's been looking at the situation knows that the left has just been itching to get something on Trump and to take him out of office because they don't think that he should have won the 2016 election. That election was for Hillary Clinton to win. So by doing this, the left has actually harmed the country because now, by making it so blatantly political, they have actually destroyed their own credibility with honest and objective people. And that brings me to my third point. So many people have been making the focus of this story on Trump. They've been focusing it on Trump. Is Trump going to be impeached or is he not? People on Twitter were even saying, too, wow, you people on the left have really shot yourselves in the foot because even if Trump is impeached and removed from office, that just means that Mike Pence becomes president and he's even more conservative than Trump. Forget about all that. Forget about all that and just remember this. The left has begun a formal impeachment inquiry based on a whistleblower whose story has no substance. In other words, there is no evidence. At this point in time, there is no evidence of any sort of wrongdoing. That, to me, shows me that we are neck deep in the post-factual world, where things like the truth and the facts, they don't matter. All that matters is your ideology. All that matters is your political agenda, okay? And so that opens up a huge Pandora's box, which will never be able to be closed. Because think about this. If you can impeach someone, if you can remove someone from office, even though there is no evidence of a crime, no evidence of corruption whatsoever, if you can still successfully move to remove someone from office and then successfully remove him from said office, what shot does a normal Joe have of actually getting justice? Okay? If facts, if the truth, if evidence don't mean anything, and the only thing that matters are, preconceived conclusions based on our ideology and what we want to happen based on our political agenda, how is anyone actually going to have a shot at getting justice in this country? I might have mentioned it before, but Alexander Hamilton said that the first duty of a society is justice. If you don't have justice, then you don't have much of a society. And I've spoken before about how the very first thing a society needs in order to survive is order. And that's true, but that's the bare minimum. You need order to actually have a civilization, to have a country, to actually survive. You need justice in order for people to actually flourish. And without that, your civilization might not be worth saving. That is the Pandora's box that the left is so temptingly trying to open by getting anything at all to stick against Donald Trump, evidence or no. That is story number one. Our second story comes to us from the Anti-Defamation League, which, like Nancy Pelosi, has done a complete 180. They have now determined that the AOK sign, this sign right here, it is now a symbol of white supremacy. Yes, this is now a symbol of white supremacy. It has now been logged in with the rest of the ADL's hate symbols. This now ranks with things like the swastika, the Iron Cross, and the KKK's white hood, and burning crosses in front lawns. Now, you would be forgiving, gang, to ask, what the heck is going on? How do they even come to this conclusion? Well, that is an interesting story in and of itself. So, a little while back, the alt-right, who are not nice people, I'm just going to say that right now, out loud. They are not the nicest people in the world. A lot of them are genuine white supremacists and white nationalists. But anyway, that's not the point. The alt-right, a while back, they decided to play basically what was a prank on the left. And on 4chan, the website where the alt-right has gone to create memes such as Pepe the Frog, they said that this was a white supremacy symbol. Okay? It was all a gag. It was all a joke. But the thing is, the left actually took them seriously. Ideologues and people on the left actually took them seriously. When the alt-right said, hey, this is a white supremacy symbol, the left actually took them at their word and said, oh my God, you're right. It is a white supremacy symbol. The alt-right just said so. And this opened up, I mean, it was completely ridiculous. Fox News actually described it this way. Fox News said, quote, "It was meant to bait the media or people with liberal ideals to overreact, ADL experts say, and therefore look ridiculous for condemning such an innocuous sign. But in 2019, the sign was adapted by some white nationalists," unquote. So, this started out as a prank against the ideologues and against progressives. Ideologues and progressives actually took it seriously. The ADL said, no, this is just a joke. But now this has actually been made into a white supremacist symbol by some white nationalists. So now the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, has said that yes, this is actually now a symbol of white supremacy, white nationalism, and it is therefore a hate symbol. Although they were very generous to say that, well, not everyone who actually does this is a white nationalist or a white supremacist. And thank goodness that they made that distinction, because it's hard enough to keep track of everything that goes on in all the different lanes of the modern culture. So you could be forgiven if this equals, racial hatred kind of slipped under your radar. Now, of course, there are a few things to say about this. I mean, in the first place, this is a huge abdication of power on the side of the Anti-Defamation League. That's one way that you could look at this story, because what the ADL is basically saying is that they are now basically acquiescing to the alt-right, that this is a white supremacy symbol. They basically handed the alt-right a new symbol, a new sign on a silver platter. If the ADL had really wanted to check the white supremacists and the white nationalists and the alt-right, if they had really wanted to check them, they wouldn't have done anything. They would have continually laughed at their face. They would have said, yeah, really, you're so desperate to find a symbol that you're going to use this? Calm down, guys. You're playing into their hands, okay? This is nothing. This is the alt-right pulling your chain, trying to get a reaction. That's how you could have castrated this completely. That's how you could have made this whole thing impotent. But they didn't. The fact that they did a 180 and actually made it, they actually declared it to be a white supremacist symbol, now means that they, not the alt-right, but they, the Anti-Defamation League and the ideologues and the progressives on the left who were running around saying that the sky is falling because of this, they have given this the power that it now has. They have given it the power that it now has. Not the alt-right, the left. Okay? And everyone who was basically going, oh my God, look at this, white supremacy is right here, they're the ones who are responsible for giving this the power that it is now going to have. Now that's one way to look at this story, but there's another way to look at this story, and that is through pure ideological politics, because there is a part of me, call it the cynical part if you want, I have one, I am perfectly willing to admit that. The cynical side of me thinks that everyone on the left who made a big deal about this knew that it was a prank. That they knew that it was the alt-right trying to pull their chain. But Nate, why then would they react the way they did? I mean, they basically gave the alt-right exactly what they wanted. Well, from one point of view, yes. But here we get into, politics and culture. Who exactly is playing who? You could say that the alt-right played the left. You could also look at it and say that the left played the alt-right. Because look at this. This used the AOK symbol. Innocuous, practically universal, especially here in America. You give this, everyone knew, exactly what you meant. Hey, how are things going? You knew what that meant. You knew what that meant. It was universal, right? Well, think about now if a universal symbol is able to be made into a white supremacist symbol. Now, when everyone makes this, right, which used to just mean things are great, how are things with you? If this now means white supremacy and white nationalism, and everyone, has been indoctrinated to believe that white nationalism, white supremacy, it's everywhere, it's just waiting to boil over, it's just waiting to strike, right? If they're walking down the street now, and they see people, innocuous, normal, everyday people, just doing this and everything, they're going to say, oh my God, they're right. White supremacy and white nationalism, it is everywhere. It is everywhere. They were telling the truth. Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But the only solution, here's the left. Well, we told you that it was everywhere. We told you it was everywhere. What is the only thing to do? Move further to the left, please, further to the left, in order to counteract the white supremacy, white nationalism, alt-rightism that obviously now permeates society because everyone is doing this. That's another way of looking at this story. I have absolutely no proof that is what happened, but it's another way of looking at the story. It's another way to analyze the story. And again, my default position is that the people on the left, right, the ideologues, the progressives, the spiritual progressives, the woke, they're smarter than what we give them credit for. They're smarter than what a lot of people on the right give them credit for. And they may be insane. They may be crazy. But they are operating under a chain of logic that is very strong based on their first principles. And they are very cunning. And they are very adept. And they are very much aware of their surroundings. So it's perfectly possible that someone saw a very good political opportunity to turn the tables on the alt-right. And instead of the alt-right checking the left, it was the left who has checked the alt-right. But there's one more point that I wanted to make. And this ties it in with our first story, where I talked about the post-factual world. What do you think that this equals white nationalism, white supremacy? What do you think that that's going to do with the post-factual world? I'll tell you what it's going to do. It's going to blow it out of the water. Remember, the ADL said that not everyone who does this is a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Again, generous of them. But we live in a politicized world. Remember, just 2 weeks ago, we talked about how chicken sandwiches have been made political, right? So if chicken sandwiches have been made political, no one, if they see this now, no one is going to immediately assume, oh, they didn't mean anything by it. He just means A-OK. I'm sure that he's not a white supremacist, a white nationalist, or someone on the alt-right. You know what? The odds are pretty slim that he's going to do that. No, absolutely not. In our politicized society, anytime someone is seen doing this, they are immediately going to be outed as a white nationalist and a white racist. And then the background checks are going to start. People are going to comb through their Twitter, their Instagram, their Facebook, their LinkedIn, their Pinterest, their Tumblrs, their blogs, if they have a YouTube channel, if they have any sort of presence online whatsoever, and most people do now, people will go through all of those social media accounts, all of those presences with a fine-tooth comb, and anything that even remotely brings to mind a phantom of something that is racist or a microaggression is going to be pushed before the public and made to, and it's going to be made to look like proof positive that this particular individual is a racist, is a white supremacist, and needs to be completely excommunicated from society. There are going to be demands, to his employer, whoever that is, for him to be fired or for him to be reprimanded or punished. If he's a business owner, you know what? There are going to be calls to boycott his business. The entire community is going to be whipped up to immediately smash him down for his crime of being a white supremacist. All because someone asked him how he was doing, and he responded with this because he didn't know that the ADL said that this was a white supremacist symbol. Or even if he did, he said, well, they themselves said that not everyone who does it is a racist and a hater, so I'm just going to use it in the original meaning. That's what's going to happen. It is going to further fan the flames of this post-factual world. Thank you, ADL, for that. But that is story number 2. And our final story for this video of the Rolling Stone takes us to the Pentagon. Because if you might have noticed, there's a little movie coming out next week that DC is releasing called Joker. And if you're wondering if I'm going to go and see that movie, you can bet your bottom dollar right now, baby, that I'm going to. But anyway, in spite of the rave reviews, and this movie has been getting rave reviews, it has been limitedly released at things like film festivals and whatnot. Critics and audiences are gobbling it up. They say that Joaquin Phoenix is amazing. They are praising the direction of the movie, the look of the movie, and everything. But along with all this praise, there have been negative vibes towards this movie. It has been claimed that Joker promotes and defends white supremacy, white nationalism, and incels as well. It justifies white nationalists, white supremacists, and incels. It says, look, the white man, he can't get no justice in society anymore. Intersectionality, feminism, Black Lives Matter, and all of that. People are just spitting on the white man. So it's perfectly justified for you as a white man to take the Joker as your role model and basically to initiate violence against society to make everything better for you. That's the argument. That is the argument that some people have been making against Joker. It promotes, defends, and encourages violence against society by white men who feel that they have been slighted by a pluralistic society, and by incels, people who would like to have a girlfriend but who can't and decide to blame society because of that fact. Well, the Pentagon itself has gotten involved in this. The Pentagon actually released an email, to military personnel, because the Pentagon says that the FBI found activity on the dark web among incels. And apparently it is true, or it's possibly true, that incels on the dark web have been taking the Joker as a mascot. And there was even apparently talk, the FBI said, that some of these incels were going to shoot up theaters where Joker was playing after it was released. And this, of course, brought up memories of Aurora, Colorado, when James Holmes shot up the movie theater there during a showing of The Dark Knight Rises in 2012. So the FBI told the Pentagon, and the Pentagon released an email memo to its personnel. That in itself isn't the bad thing. That isn't the story. What is the story is what the Pentagon told its military personnel to do in case any of them went to see Joker, and in case anyone actually started shooting up a theater where Joker was playing. You want to know what the Pentagon told its military personnel to do? You want to take a wild guess as to what the Pentagon told its soldiers to do? Okay? This is what the Pentagon said. Quote, I'm quoting now. Run if you can. If you're stuck, hide, also known as sheltering in place, and stay quiet. If a shooter finds you, fight with whatever you can. Unquote. Basically, what we have here is the Pentagon, the nucleus, the center, the head and the heart of the U.S. military complex, telling its people, its soldiers, its military personnel to run away if they actually are in the same theater as a shooter in a showing of Joker. And I want to emphasize this point. This memo, from what I was able to find out, didn't mention anything about helping civilians get out of the theater. You know, evacuate civilians first and then go back and take care of the shooter. Or evacuate civilians and then get out and then cooperate with law enforcement or do anything like that. No, it is just run if you can. In other words, every man for himself. Don't bother trying to take care of the shooter. Don't bother trying to do that and save civilian lives. Even though you are a soldier, you have been trained to do this and you took an oath to protect innocent civilians. Never mind about that. Don't even try to evacuate the civilians, because you know what? You are more important. You have to look out for number one, good buddy. And all you other civilians, well, if they die, God will sort them out. It's okay. This is absolutely disgraceful. For the first time, really, outside of a historical setting, this is the first time in a long time where I can actually look people in the eye and say that I am ashamed of the military, specifically the Pentagon, for planting these seeds of cowardice inside of its personnel. And what really makes it worse is that just this past weekend, President Trump got through telling the UN that under his administration, the United States military is now the most powerful one on the earth again, after having its budget cut under President Obama's administrations. Well, all the money in the world, all the technological doodads and gimmicks and gadgets from James Bond and Star Trek and everything like that doesn't mean jack if your soldiers are cowards. Doesn't mean a thing. And this is exactly what the military is trying to do to our soldiers. They are trying to make them cowards. There is no other way to interpret this. When they say if there is an active shooter, the first thing you do is run away. The first thing that a soldier should do in a situation like that is to stop the shooter. Because that's what he's trained to do. A soldier is trained for combat. Not only that, a soldier is rather like the modern, our modern version of the knight. You have the training to fight and kill people. All of these civilians probably don't. The civilians and a shooter are in a theater room together, and the shooter is killing innocent people. It is your duty to stop him as best you can, to make every effort that you can to stop him. That's one of the reasons why you are a soldier. So it doesn't matter if the military has if we spend all the money in the world on our military. It doesn't matter if we have the biggest military. It doesn't matter if we have all the latest inventions and weapons to make us the most powerful in the world. If the core of our military, which is the men, the personnel, if they are cowards, none of that matters. And this actually gets into something deeper. This gets into something deeper too, and something that's even more terrifying to think about. To paraphrase Dr. Camille Paglia, civilization is very fragile. Civilization is the exception and not a rule. The rule is actually nature, right? Chthonic, dark, destructive, merciless, uncaring. That is actually the norm. Now, man is a political animal. Man is actually naturally compelled to come together and to form states, to form communities, to form societies. We have that natural urge within us, just in our nature. But it's very hard to do, because at that same time, because we are fallen, we have a fallen nature. Just pick up any newspaper, open up, any news site on the internet, and you're going to see proof positive of that fact. Because of that, we have to fight tooth and claw against nature to actually beat it back, carve out a space for ourselves, and erect civilization. and then maintain civilization. In order to do all that, you need strong individuals. You need strong persons. Camille Paglia goes a step further, and she actually specifically says you need strong men. She says that civilization is the result of actually men fighting and building and allowing basically a space of peace and flourishing for women. Now, not getting into the specifics of that, okay? What we can all agree on is that it takes strong individuals. You need strong men and strong women to beat back nature, form civilization in society, and to maintain that civilization and society. So if the military, right? If the military is actually demasculating its people, if it's turning men and its women into cowards, then how in the heck are we actually going to defend civilization? Never mind about standing up against the Russians or the Iranians or the North Koreans or the Chinese, if it actually came to a physical war. Never mind that. How the heck are we even supposed to keep civilization from crumbling under the onslaught of chthonic nature if the default position is cowardice? If the default position is look after yourself, run if you can, if you can't do that, hide, and only if you can't do those two should you try and take down the villain, the evil person, the bad guy. Only then. How are we going to keep civilization like that? With that, if weakness is our default position, I've got news for you, gang. I don't think that we can. I think that it is impossible to do that, again, because civilization can only be created and it can only be maintained through strength. If you don't have strength, then you are not going to have what it takes to defend and to preserve that civilization and that way of life. And that is going to spread to every level of society. Like I said, soldiers are kind of, they're the closest, one of the closest things that we have to superheroes. They're the closest things that we have to the medieval knight, which, as much bashing as the Middle Ages takes these days, we still romanticize the knights for a reason. So if our modern equivalent of the knight is basically now a self-centered coward, why in the world should anyone else stick out their neck and actually follow honor, duty, and be courageous and stand up against evil, whether that's an evil movement or an evil individual, an evil person with a large checking account or an evil person with a gun? Why should we? There is no real reason. There is no real reason. Those are the seeds that the Pentagon is sowing with that message. But as usual, I have talked too long, hopefully not as long as last time, trying to keep it a little bit shorter, but I am going to wrap up the video here, and I will say to you, like I always do at the end of these videos, happy Friday, have a great weekend, see you on Tuesday. Ciao.